Good afternoon. Welcome to Punctuation Con. I'd like to welcome you to a panel on this is not the apocalypse we've been expecting. My name is Pat McMurray, and I'll let my two co-panelists introduce themselves. Ron?
Hi, I'm Ron Gamble, and I'm on this panel for some reason.
And my name, if you need to find me, is Adela Terrell, and I'm also on this panel. And this is definitely not what I expected from living in the future.
Yeah, certainly.
I mean, I'm of a certain age. In Ireland, we didn't practice the hiding underneath the desk from nuclear bombs, but when I was a kid in the 60s and 70s, we expected either a hot end of the world or a cold end of the world, you know, nuclear and asteroid or overpollution and disease. So I'm not that surprised, but there are details that surprise me. What about you, Adela?
Yeah, well, as you can see, I'm holding my little chum here from the vault. I honestly expected that at some point, bearing in mind when I was a kid, When the Wind Blows was a big cartoon. Everybody liked When the Wind Blows. So what I was expecting was that we would all go off and hide in our nuclear bunkers, and then there'd be a terrible nuclear winter, but we'd outwait it, and then we would all emerge in our little natty blue jumpsuits, and that somehow if we survived, we would have to make our own way of it in this hellscape. Now, I live in Penge, but it's not really a hellscape.
Yeah. What about yourself, Ron? What sort of apocalypse did you grow up with?
Well, I'm 62, so my definite apocalypse expected in the early 80s was a nuclear war. So that was back in the early 80s, the cruise missiles just being developed and things that I see looked like a real strong possibility. So that one probably would be the case. Though in reality, when I think about it, my as a little child, there was major flu epidemics taking place and major Hong Kong flu was about a place in '68. So all those things could have gone this way.
Polio, for example.
Yeah,
I was vaccinated against polio. Yeah.
So those things were there. Just as a child, you didn't think they was there.
Yeah, one of the things that occurred to me is that science fiction has always written about these sort of cold apocalypses as well. With John Brunner and J.G. Ballard, you know, there were people writing about this, not necessarily reading it, but certainly writing it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, those were the only two I could think. Sorry, I know there are lots of others, but this whole cold apocalypse and how the world would work afterwards, you know. And then even later on, things like cyberpunk was all about what really looked like a post-apocalyptic world, but things hadn't quite come to an end, you know?
Yeah, I think of later days, I mean, I've got a few books there which I can think of. I would consider as being the post-apocalyptic books. I mean, for himself, Station 11.
Yeah.
Is a definite one, and that looks so much like what's taking place now. Well, not as severe. You know, what Station 11 was pretty seriously severe stuff. Whereas, so very much like a virus. It's getting probably closer to the truth than what we actually had as fans reading in the 80s.
Okay, so there are a couple of differences between what we've read about in a lot of science fiction. For starters, this is a pandemic we're living through. But for example, the typical pandemic science fiction novel was all like The Stand or something. Almost everybody dies. Here, not many people die, you know?
Yeah.
Enough people are dying.
Yeah,
I just say, there's been enough. It can stop now, thanks.
I agree completely, but it's kind of like...
But yeah, it's not like said for Zachariah where I'm living on my own in a valley and there's like one other guy. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I know but what's interesting is the psychological impact that even this relatively low death rate and illness rate is giving us, you know?
Yeah. I think the other thing that strikes me about this, that you don't see in any of the books we've read, is the fact that the world hasn't actually been damaged too much. It's just been put on hold.
Mm.
So the world's been put on pause button for 12 months. There's a substantial, there's about 1.5 million dead or something so far. Which is,
Globally, about 2 million.
yeah, well, globally, 2 million people is not a big number.
Yes. Apart from, it's a horrific number from one aspect, but yes, in terms of if you look at the stand where there were like 2 million survivors rather than 2 million dead, but, it just goes to show that Stephen King has a more horrific imagination than bats in China,
Yeah, but it's just the fact that the world has stopped. I mean, that's what's really strange surprise to me. I didn't expect the world to stop. So we've actually every day's the same day. So I wasn't really expecting that. That comes as a bit of a shock to me.
I think what's interesting, and this is perhaps what we're talking about, is the different experiences, because I suspect that Ella's had quite a different experience of living through the pandemic, but lots of things that still have to go on,
Well, except things like my year used to be set up with certain things I did. In April, I would be there at the London Marathon helping people who'd just run 26 miles. Why? And then every year I'd say to people, I've just done the London Marathon, and people would be like, yeah. I'm the one picking the runners up at the end and feeding them Haribo, don't ask. So it's like, I do that. And then I have, summertime. It's the summer concerts in Hyde Park, and I get people that perhaps partied a little bit too hard or just had an epic nosebleed when they're in Hyde Park in the middle of nowhere, and I'm the person who has all the tissues. And then at the end of that, it's Notting Hill. And I used to have all these things. I used to measure out my year in where I would be expecting to be working. And then suddenly it's like, right, can you just go work in A&E? And just be in A&E every, or could you just do an entire week at Moorfields Eye Hospital, because so many people have been waiting for cataract operations while it's not been safe. We're going to try and do 800 cataract operations in 1 week. And so the little beats that I used to expect my year to go by, even things like school holidays, because when my children weren't in school, the fact that it was like suddenly it was the half-term holiday, it didn't make any difference. Nothing had actually changed. So all of these beats that I used to put up, that I used to have, that used to keep my year going, just aren't there anymore. And I'm doing very strange and unusual things, like, being involved in cataract operations.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm quite used to spouting nonsense on a panel. I can just normally smell my fellow panelists.
I know. It's kind of like in a sense, even in a cold apocalypse with overpopulation and pollution, you expected that suddenly breaking point, and before that everything would be fine, and after that everything would be awful. But we keep reaching little breaking points, like the floods last year and this pandemic, and who knows what's coming next. And yet each time we have to carry on and pick up and glue together some pretense of real life,
Yeah, I was just thinking of, you imagine, one of the books I read as a kid was one of the ones where there was a massive illness and nearly everybody died except for a few kids. But they were able to do things like they were able to just jump in people's cars and steal them, and then drive until that car ran out of petrol, and then they'd jump out and they'd leap in another car. I don't know if the car they leapt into had it wasn't described that the corpse was still sitting at the wheel, but the keys were still in the car, because, it's the 80s, cars are quite old. So you just leap it. When your car ran out of petrol, you jump in another one that was just abandoned in the highway due to the owner getting too sick to drive anymore, and just keep going. And I think at the end of that, those kids were living in Harrods, and just wearing the clothes and eating the food that was left. Whereas sort of in our real apocalypse, sometime in March, I went to look around the supermarket just to, literally, I needed to get some food in, and it was like, okay, they've left, there's nothing. And it was weird because that was like a a supply chain apocalypse, because it wasn't really that we were out of food. It's just the food wasn't expected to have to get from the warehouse to the supermarket as quickly as they thought they would need it. But people were just going mad, getting whatever they could, except in my local Aldi. I took a picture of this completely empty shelf, totally bare, apart from a little box with all the packets of quinoa in it that nobody touched. So we might have been starving, but we weren't hungry enough for quinoa.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. But then there's this odd thing that here we are 6 months later, kind of deep into a second lockdown, but all those shortages that we seem to be suffering from 6 months ago seem to have stopped. There's toilet paper, there's rice, there's everything.
The infrastructure is there.
Yeah. Or the people that bought it last time still haven't used up all they got. Yeah. I swear blind, in the one shop in Penn that still had toilet paper in it, there was a woman in front of me she bought so many rolls of 9 toilet papers that she couldn't carry them all. And she'll still be using those. Nobody goes through that much.
And what's interesting is how is after the first shock. Okay, so here's something I've been thinking about. After the first shock, everybody's tried to carry on as close to normal as we can. The cinemas might be closed, but movies are either being delayed or being released on streaming services. And there are some things you haven't got to see. For example, I saw some of those national theatre plays that they released in the spring. Have there been compensations for you in this slow motion apocalypse of ours? Things you've managed to do, Ron?
I've done a lot more. I mean, I'm a first aid trainer. So as a first aid trainer, there was no work. Or maybe we had specialist stuff to do, or we had key workers. But so then most of my training became online, doing the distance learning courses for mental health. I was doing a fair chunk of that. But I seem to have done a lot more cycling. I mean, the crazy thing I've done, I think, is a few months back, I took part of the Bedford Foundation's fundraiser for a cycling fundraiser. So you're cycling at the distance stuff. And I thought, this sounds a good idea. I'll do this. And now I actually changed that from that to doing a virtual bike ride. And right now I'm virtually riding to Copenhagen.
Okay.
So I'm adding a mileage up. I'm doing a virtual bike ride. And it's weird out myself. I'm beginning to ride like just local areas. Well, I'm imagining I'm riding to Copenhagen. So it's almost like you give yourself targets that aren't really targets.
Sorry, Adela?
No, I was literally about to say, speaking of targets, one of my big post-apocalyptic things was always, before the apocalypse, was Zombies Run. And the voice in my head is going, come in, runner 5, come in, head towards the transmitter, head towards this, head towards that. And I'm just running around my local park, but nice Sam in my earphones is saying, yeah, runner 5, we need you to run to the hospital to find these research notes, go. And I'm running in my local area, but I can picture where I'm supposed to be running. So I guess that's a difference of this apocalypse, is I'm not being sent out every day to run looking for a sports bra and a bottle of water. And actually, Zombies Run, in at least one of the episodes, sorry for no spoilers, this is season 1 anyway, in one of the episodes, you're sent to run to a game store to pick up a new copy of, well, they don't call it Dungeons and Dragons, but it's near enough, to pick up the latest rulebook sets for Dungeons and Dragons and things, because they're so bored under lockdown in their zombie-proof compound that can we go get some more role-playing games? So at least in Zombies Run, as long as I take a gun and I'm good at headshot, I can still go shopping.
Well, do you know what, that actually does quite realistically portray something about our present catastrophe, the community awareness. You know, my on our local street we have a WhatsApp. People are helping each other. Not so bad this time as first time, but you know, getting medication, bits of shopping, sharing news. You know, it's been quite a community builder in an odd sort of way.
It's been good.
And I saw how many things that hadn't changed, but talking about the first season is when I walked into, I still had to do the evaluation to check I was still legal to randomly attack people in the street if they'd fallen over. I walked in to do my skills upgrade, my annual skills upgrade, and Annie didn't have a face on. You know, the resuscitation Annie, those dolls that we use when we're doing our CPR. The faces on the dolls are removable for cleaning because obviously you do mouth to mouth normally. I walked in to do my test and Annie was lying dead in the middle of the floor like normal, but she didn't have her rubber face on because at the minute we're not allowed to do mouth to mouth, or certainly the British Resuscitation Council is saying no mouth to mouth, just do compressions while you ring for a more grown up to come in their ambulance. Yeah, so they thought, well, just to save on the washing up afterwards, we won't put the rubber face on Annie. And she's lying there with just her plastic skeleton. And that was one of the bits where I thought, gosh, things have actually changed. I'm so used to walking into this room annually and I'm supposed to go, oh no, look, it's a dead person. Help, can someone help? I'm looking around for danger. And I walked in and I was taken aback because the scene had changed. She didn't have her face on. There was no mouth to mouth.
Adela, I know you live in quite an urban area. You said Penge.
Yeah,
Penge. Has there been more of a community spirit? I know Penge. I lived there once. I know it's a community place anyway. But has there been more of a community spirit?
We did have, during the first lockdown, we did have a mutual aid group, and it was quite nice. There was people like, you know, if you were a volunteer, like the local ambulance hub is here at Crystal Palace. So local restaurants were, say, taking around big bags full of takeaway like curries for people to either reheat in the microwave there or take home and that sort of thing. So yeah, we did seem to fall back on a bit more of a community spirit in the mutual aid group, but it's been very, very quiet since about the summer. I think they've realized that people seem to manage to get along. It's got a nice feeling, but I don't think that's changed. I don't think the community we have here has changed from normal. Although one of the things I noticed the other day was a teacher in the local group said, does anybody have kids' books that would be suitable for my primary school classroom? And then she gave the age range and what have you. Because when the kids bring their reading book back from home, it's supposed to go into quarantine for a few days before another child can take it, just in case. So, of course, they might have had previously enough books in the class library to share, but they don't have enough books for the books to go home and then come back and then be put aside for a few days. So she was like, who has books? And the response to that was massive. There was lots of people going, oh, yeah, I've just to clean out, or, oh, my kids are just that little bit older than that. So she said she had a really good response to that. So she was able to stock up the classroom.
What is really noticeable in places that are deeper into the end of the world than us, like Syria and Lebanon, for example, is that pretty much the last thing to go is community spirit. You know, that the last people who are trying to sort things out and make it all work are local communities. So that's kind of a little flicker of hope in the midst of chaos sometimes. So there's been so somebody had to mention the word. What happens when Brexit hits though? We're going through all this and we're going to get whacked around the head by Brexit in 6 weeks. How are we going to get through that?
It'll be all right.
All right. I'll tell you what. Ron goes first, then Adela, and you can row with each other if you want.
I think it'll be I can't imagine it happening in 6 weeks. But assuming that the worst does happen, we don't get extended, then it'll be manageable. I think we just deal with longer queues, get vehicles into things, and I think it's going to be difficult, and I can't see it being practical. So I think I can't see it happening. Yes, but if it does happen, it's going to be problematic.
It does seem really weird that right in the middle of a pandemic, with our economy on life support and a million people made redundant last month, that we wouldn't just say, "Hang on, let's take a breath," But
yeah, I think
maybe
politically,
maybe that's when Mr. Cummings got the boot, so they can do that. But maybe we're just being madly optimistic. What do you think, Adela?
Oh, I think we're the problem with having arguments about Brexit and what have you is I would say that most of fandom are the sort of people who quite liked doing things like going to Eurocons or even just like popping to Dublin Worldcons and what have you, and not having to worry too much about the fact that technically it's across international borders. I mean, it's hard enough to go to America sometimes. So we're probably all singing from the same hymn sheet, which is why didn't you just give up when you realized it was completely untenable? Because of course the latest the vaccine that has been announced, like I hate to do the caveat, but it was announced in press release. It's not been peer reviewed, but that was just science brain there. But if it is, like they say, 90% effective, it's Pfizer. It's been manufactured in Germany and Belgium. It has to be kept at ultra low temperatures. And it has to get from the European Union to us with apparently no trade agreement, possible like queues to get in and out of the country with anything you're importing. It's a horrible thing to think about. So who mentioned the B word? How very dare you?
Yes, it was. Yes, it happened. Yes, I know who it was mentioned the B word, but I won't. But yeah, it's an interesting situation, and the other thing I found interesting about that was apparently it was a German Turkish couple that were the main drivers behind this new virus. So, what else we got? Sorry. So I have taken, like I say, I have tried to take little bits of glee where I can find them. Things like I really wish we had a competent government, but while we have an incompetent one, I'm going to enjoy it. Yes. Andy Sawyer has made a very interesting comment that this is very much a classic Day of the Triffids scenario, the Brexit thing, that we can manage one destabilizing thing, but suddenly we have two. We have a pandemic and we have Brexit, and that might be the problem. Either of them we could probably manage without two, either of them we could probably manage and get through, but the combination of the two could be quite a challenge.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I'd be interested in comments from the audience if there's any post-apocalyptic books where they've read where it's just where there is some sort of pylon. Like I really enjoyed Joe Hill's book where lots of people get a weird bug that makes them burst into flames. It was called the Fireman, if I remember right. Someone will correct me if I got that wrong. But but some people embraced the bug that they got and discovered that they didn't actually burst into flames. If they embraced it, they just changed into a different sort of person. But that was just, obviously it brought around about huge problems for the population because of the people who were dying, and then because of the rogue gangs of people who'd embraced the fact that they were living with this illness that they had. But it was just that one thing. It's like if we were living in District 12, if we were living in the Hunger Games, again, it was one big thing that brought about the downfall of that particular society, that they then broke the society up into like these severe castes, these districts.
Yeah. Andy Sawyer mentions Day of the Triffids, where first everybody went blind, and then the man-eating plants ate all the blind people. The two things that went wrong. So I think civilizations are quite delicately balanced, and while most can manage a single catastrophe, two in order. Yeah.
I mean, not as much a apocalypse one. The thing I was thinking was Fugue from Darkened Island.
Ah, yes, Christopher Priest.
I mean, if there ever was a book that was forecasting what could possibly happen, it's probably that one.
Yeah.
And and that was again a terrible thing. It happened. Nuclear wars happened in Africa. and millions of people came over. But it wasn't so much the fact of the dreadful thing of the war, which had caused all this, but the political and the cultural changes in the community, dealing with this influx of millions of people.
Mm.
Now it's like, which was bigger and more dangerous than the first catastrophe itself. So that was probably one of the scariest books I've read. And when we had the Middle East issues only a few years back, and we had masses of people coming from Syria, and people still coming, and masses of people from North Africa. Then we had this situation again. I think what damages us as a society isn't necessarily the thing that caused the thing. It's our reactions to it, and then maybe
how people react. Yeah,
and on the cultural level, and on the political level.
One of the things that I'm tempted to say that there's been so much science fiction about this sort of slow motion cold catastrophe that you wish our leaders read more science fiction and less Greek. But I suspect if there are any Greek scholars, exactly. But I suspect if there are any Greek scholars in the audience, they'll say, no, Greek fiction is full of catastrophes. The burning of Troy, for example. Sorry, I know very little about Greek history, but. But yeah,
because Troy was in Greece. Anyway, I was just thinking about the question of this panel that it isn't the post-apocalyptic thing that we were looking for. Is there a post-apocalypse that we were looking forward to? Because I'm just thinking I would love to have like the attack of the giant crabs. I'm not a big fan of crabs, but I'm just thinking if I could ride one, I'd look really cool. Or maybe got a bit Mad Maxy, but I'd have to have my own like enclave and then my own set of war boys looking out for me.
To be honest, my expectation of a catastrophe was something like 4 minutes warning before nuclear oblivion. I live like 30 miles from Barrow in Furness, or maybe a couple of days warning before an asteroid hits the Earth. That was actually what I expect. Here we go. Somebody has just mentioned crabs are cute. Yes, they really are. Graham Head has said that the background of Clark's Rama is an Earth that has been going through a decades-long debilitating recession. Another slow catastrophe.
Okay.
I think I can share this. Can I show this? Oh, yes. There we
go.
Oh, sorry, I'd forgotten about that. I'll make more use of that now. Yeah, but it's hiding your face, Adela. I'm sorry about that. I'll get rid of it.
No, it's fine. I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Oh, what's this? And Marcus Rowland, Forgotten Futures, lots of interesting Edwardian catastrophe stories. So basically, this is something we've always been talking about: the future going wrong and things going wrong. What sort of that's a good question, Adela. Apart from the crabs, what else would you like to see? Are there other catastrophes you'd like to see?
I mean, it is the world's. I think it might be the world's, or at least one of the world's first Mary Sues, but she gender flips herself anyway, and it's Mary Shelley's The Last Man, where she is the last man, but she's for the purpose of this book, she's a man. But basically, there is a massive plague that has wiped out nearly everyone in the whole of at least Europe. Europe, because of course there's no transatlantic communication and what have you. But at least the whole of Europe is pretty much nearly all dead, except for about at the start of the novel at least. It's her and her mates in a big mansion, sort of having a bit of a summer party, like where people would go away from town for the summer to somebody's big house. So at the start of that massive pandemic, they're all hanging out in a massive house having parties, and you're there with your mates Byron and Claire and Percy, and you're all having, and I guess Polidori was probably there because he was never far from Byron's side, and you're all hanging out in your big mansion having a bit of a party. until the illness takes all your mates, and then it's just you. Oh, well,
Right.
that bit's less good. But the bit where you get a mansion and you just all party, let's go for that.
One of the things I find interesting to think about is how this will affect how people talk about the future in future. Because let me try and make sense of what I'm about to say. As pandemics go, this is not a bad one. It's much less deadly than SARS, for example. If SARS had ever reached this sort of level, there'd be 5 times as many dead. So this has been.
But that's because SARS makes you really, really sick really, really quickly.
And therefore,
so the problem with this is that you can get sick and still travel, whereas when you got SARS, you'd get sick and that's it. You're not going anywhere. You've gone to your bed.
But it is
so the fact that this is less deadly is the reason why it's travelled quite so much.
Right.
SARS and in fact MERS as well. The second you got those, you were in your bed. You weren't going anywhere.
But what I understand is that because people are basically pressing into zones in the Amazon and the Far East that were generally uninhabited, and we're now encountering other animals and new species and new diseases, there will be other waves of pandemic to follow. Of various sorts.
That is the scientific hypothesis I've been reading too. Yeah. And things like going mining in caves where you might run into, say, a species of bat that humans don't normally hang out with, but you're there because you're after the minerals that are needed for the mobile phone and what have you.
Yeah, so I suspect we might see more pandemics coming our way over the next few years, of various levels of deadliness.
But I think the advantage, though, this time around is that one thing that I think nations like ourselves, and we won't be on our own, that were caught out, was that we don't have an independent drugs industry. We didn't have a big industry big to produce vaccines. We don't have the test and trace industry. Didn't exist in the UK. Could say it doesn't exist now.
I would argue with you about the test and trace thing, because local government were doing a fantastic job with STDs, for example. It was the government's choice to take it away from them and give it to a private company instead.
I think you're right. That's definitely government's inadequacy.
Yeah,
it should be that approach. So we may see difference. I mean, a good example would be I know people who work in the industry that makes and sells PPE. I've heard all kinds of stories which I won't repeat. But about why it didn't turn up, what happened to it. But it's a case of like, at least this time round, if it happens again, we should be better prepared for it than we are now. One thing I will see as a plus of what's actually happened. There's so many pluses. Is that I think we're showing that we don't really need the global travel that we actually have got. We've invented this global, we must travel everywhere by jet and get there tomorrow. This mass migration of population, we really don't need that as a planet. And I think as an industry, that industry probably could do it being turned down a bit.
I think you're right. So I think there are a couple of things I'd pick out of that. The first is that the bulk of international travel a lot of international travel has been about refugees fleeing war zones and ecological catastrophes. That's going to get worse. I mean, international jet setting wasn't helping a lot. But what's interesting is that when people could in the summer, they were desperate. Hundreds of thousands, millions of people went to Spain and Portugal and Greece, and you just thought, are you mad?
Yeah.
Let's spend 4 hours in a small tube full of reconditioned air, and who knows on there, But yeah.
I mean, I'm currently worried about a trip I have booked that isn't until later on next year, 2021, and I'm starting to think, is that too soon? Obviously, people are saying things about vaccination. It's not going to be out by Easter.
Yeah, I mean,
but I was suddenly thinking when you were talking about the whole international thing, I suddenly realized that in all the post-apocalyptic books I read when I was when I was younger, when I was a teenager, they were sort of, especially things like Z for Zachariah, they were actually given to you in school. So, and When the Wind Blows was, like I mentioned that earlier as well, it was a book that I first read because it was there in my school. And one of the things I've realized about that is it was very much in those books that Britain was definitely just an island on its own. I mean, in The Last Man, she steals a boat and she goes to the continent, and that's when she realized the continent's empty too. But that's different because that was before things like international communication. But even in those books that we read as a teenager, people would have like a transistor radio that they try and tune in to see if someone else was around or what have you. And yeah, we were there. There wasn't that feeling of it being international. Whereas at least in Zombies Run, they've managed to rescue the internet. They have RuffleNet. They have a rudimentary, almost like a message board system of internet, but they've managed to rescue the internet.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I think our current little catastrophe is really showing up for me is that humans are really pretty poor at planning for the future. Most companies don't plan for more than a year ahead. Governments don't seem to plan for more than the next electoral cycle. Sorry, Graham Head mentioned that we should talk about the other slow apocalypse, climate change, which is still upon us. That has not gone away, and it just seems to be an impossible thing to plan for.
And it's linked, because if Siberia is melting, who knows what we'll find lurking in the permafrost.
All these things are linked. People are moving around more because of climate change. Our own defenses, our own civil service or whatever, but medical treatment is ground down because of climate change and flooding and what have you. So let's see. Graham also has some cheerful thoughts about the apocalypses that haven't happened. Let me share some of these with you. The apocalypses that haven't happened. We have the death of grass. Everybody starved because all wheat products. They did. I don't know why they ever described John Christopher as writing cozy catastrophes. All the grass, all the wheat, all the rice is gone. That's not going to be much fun.
I tell you what, all the grass hasn't gone in Penge. My goodness. Ooh,
you can't walk down the street for these days, can you? Alien invasion. We haven't been invaded by aliens yet, have we?
I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure about that one.
I like you, Ron.
Yes, you mean we're ruled by the lizard people. Let's not go mad. And my favorite, hang on, what's this one? And the stars haven't gone out yet, so we don't have to worry about my friend Cthulhu coming back, So things could be worse. Yeah. It's interesting that it's so the most interesting thing about apocalypses in SF is what they got right and what they got wrong. That things would kind of trickle on, would carry on as best we could for as long as we could was always expected. Even in the hot nuclear catastrophes in science fiction, people are still trying to keep the world together afterwards. Yeah,
I like that comment about the catastrophes that haven't happened yet. We haven't had the internet taken out, because that would be nicely Jersey. But yeah, this massive DDoS attack and it takes out the entire internet. I'm quite glad that apocalypse hasn't happened, because if I could get out of my house if there wasn't a pandemic, I'd be mostly okay without the internet, but it'd be really hard to explain that to my kids that they couldn't get on AO3 anymore. But I would sort of be mostly okay. I do have friends that I can reach, like in real life, just about. But I would be with being shut in my house. I don't know what I'd do without the whole internet things and what have you. Could you imagine if this happened in LiveJournal days?
Yeah, that's true. If this had happened 20 years ago with LiveJournal, but then everybody would chatted on LiveJournal and IRC and
stuff, but it's not the same.
No,
it's not the same.
No. And when this happens again in 20 years' time, people will be saying, "How did they manage this before VR?"
Yeah, because I was just thinking of just speaking of big events that happened when there was the bombing in London, the 7/7 bombings. I was at home because I had very small babies, therefore I wasn't working, and quite frankly, I wasn't leaving the house because that was way too much like hard work when you've got twins and you live up the stairs. Like once they walked, we went out a lot more. And I was, because things like the BBC website and stuff like that had gone down, I was literally watching the news and posting the news on LiveJournal so my friends knew what was going on. And that was just one incident, one day in one capital city.
Yeah, I know. It is quite extraordinary. But there have and the other trouble is you've got to be careful. You can get obsessed with news, you know. Especially with this Trump thing. I'm really trying not to watch the news every minute on end, you know. See what terrible thing that terrible man has done this morning.
Don't get into podcasts as well. Let me tell you the number of podcasts I have been listening to, and I've been listening to all the podcasts, and you can get very, very, very obsessed. But at the same time, I'm not sleeping. What else am I going to do?
I've been reading a lot actually. I'm
pushing
back up to my one book a day. The last time I was able to do this, I was a teenager, you know.
That's what I was hoping. I was hoping I would get those levels back, but my brain is just like, yeah, no. When I am reading, it's like, oh, look, I've got the books P.G. Wodehouse up here. I've managed to get through some P.G. Wodehouses, but we're not even touching the True Bloods. We're not getting into the True Bloods because that's way too difficult. But we'll read some P.G. Wodehouse. That'll do. But that's, you know, I'm definitely not reading like I was. And that's it. If I was actually going to be in an actual apocalypse where I was actually, say, penned in a compound because there were zombies outside.
Yeah.
Give me my books. I'd like to be able to read. But maybe then I'd be too worried about the zombies, so I wouldn't be reading.
Okay. So
I mean, I could read and headshot at the same time. That would be good.
Are you mostly reading for comfort, or?
It's definitely comfort books. There's been a lot of coziness going on. Even, you know, so when you get to the point where you realise that Agatha Christie's aren't as cozy crime as you actually want, that you realise it's very bad.
I've been working my way through my virtual book pile, you know. Things have gone wrong when you've got 100 books on Kindle you haven't read yet. But what about yourself, Ron? How are you passing the time?
I'm actually, well, I said I do a lot of cycling, but as reading, I do read stuff. I am reading more books, which is unusual for me. I don't read a great deal of books. I've actually found spending a lot of time looking at the ancient programs we used to watch on television. I mean, Merlin's back on. We're watching Merlin, but I shed full of it all.
We've already had the panel this week on Robin of Sherwood as well.
Brilliant. You know, it's watching, and so I think many of that stuff is there.
If you missed our panel, there's an excellent 50-episode Chinese drama series called The Untamed.
It's interesting. I when you television and films about apocalypses, it's always, you know, the big thing is the disaster. Now there was something I saw quite recently. It's based on one of these things where asteroids are about to hit the Earth. Is it it's not the end of the world. Is it the end of the effing world? I'm sorry. I've been watching too much television recently to remember what I've been watching. But, yeah.
And there was somebody else in the chat was saying that they can't focus to read either. They're doing lots of embroidery, and I've actually found that I've been doing a lot of really like simple things. Like I knitted my kids a hat each because they needed a hat for school. It had to be black. And I found this really good wool. Well, it's a wool mix, but it's got stuff through it that lights up when car lights hit it. So it's black normally, but then if a car light hits it, it glows like you've got some light on your head. But that I've been doing things like that because literally once you've made the circle, you're just knitting and knitting and knitting, and you're not thinking about it till the ball of wool runs out. And then you finish it up and what have you, and then you have to think a little bit. But there's so much of that where you just aren't thinking, and it's just knitting round and round and round in a circle. And I've been doing a lot of unthinking things, and I would hope that in the apocalypse I was looking forward to, the apocalypse I expected to have, that I would have time to, I don't know, that maybe I'd be setting up my own special enclave and have my own killer band of zombie hunters that I was the leader of, rather than just sitting in my room doing some knitting.
Well, I'm working from home at the moment, which means that in one sense I am more isolated than I have ever been. Apart from taking the dog out for a cup of coffee every now and again, I'm basically or going shopping. I'm basically stuck at home. If we didn't have a dog, I'd leave home about once a week. But in another sense, I'm less isolated than I've ever been because I'm always doing things like this or talking to people. And, to be honest, for an introvert, like for an extroverted introvert or an introverted extrovert like me, it's very difficult,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I must admit like going back to those books that I definitely read a lot of in the 80s, a lot of those there would be like the one I keep mentioning is because it's the one that was the skill book, so I remember it was said for Zachariah, but I'm sure I read a lot of knockoff versions of it. And it was always a teenage girl on her own. She had her own valley, so she was getting on okay. She was maybe like in her parents' farmhouse, but they were dead or what have you. But there was always that thing where you were completely cut off. You were completely alone. You couldn't talk to anybody, and you had to like sort yourself out, be completely self-sufficient. And we're not. This isn't that apocalypse. We've all got each other.
And of course, what will happen is that life will change in ways we didn't expect. That eventually this stage of this apocalypse will come to an end, and we'll move on to something else.
Yeah, and Sandra Bond's got a book out of it, so when that gets published, we'll have something to read once we're able to read again.
Yeah.
Hey, Sandra.
So here's a good question. When we get reasonably back to normal, what's the first thing you're looking forward to doing? If you could be in something that involves a crowd of people, something that you absolutely can't do now, but you would
do you
like
know what?
to do. What?
I bloody miss you lot down the pub. Can we just all go down the pub? And it doesn't have to be the first Thursday pub meeting. There's the Super Relaxed Fancy Club pub meeting. There's, God forbid, I might even slightly miss the BSFA.
No.
No, yeah, that's I miss the fact that there used to be this thing where I could look at a calendar and go, actually, yeah, today's the first Thursday. Do you know what? I feel like having a beer, and just head out. And there would be a pub, and it would be full of people I knew. Or in Croydon on a Sunday night, I could go to the pub, and there would be people there that I knew.
Yep, and literally just before I moved to Lancaster about 2 years ago, just before lockdown, I'd finally got to the stage where there was a pub where there were always people I knew, and I was building a group of friends, and go down there on a Friday night and drink with some people I was getting to know, and suddenly that's all gone, anyway.
Or even my little, across the road from me, there's I tell this joke even though it's obviously not true. There's a place across the road that is called the Douglas Fir. It's a lovely little pub, and it's in the building that used to be my hairdresser's. That's how tiny it is. It used to be a hairdresser's, and I say, so now my hair looks shit, but I'm too drunk to care.
Yeah.
But that's a lovely little pub where I know the staff, and then the regulars sort of, we all know each other because we all live really close by. Because it's so small, you wouldn't go there for a special trip. You only go there if you live close by. So there's always somebody to chat to. And I really miss being able to do things like that. Just roll up and go, oh, hi. I'll have a half and see how you all are getting on. I'll just sit and talk to you about your day and then go home.
I definitely miss conventions, science fiction conventions as well in the real world. I mean, in another life, last night I went to Cod and Scallops fish and chip shop in Nottingham, probably with DC and Amanda and Julie, and we had fish on the first night of NovaCon.
Yeah.
Really great fish and chips, by the way, but don't tell anybody.
I like the Jersey person that said that they're now mixing socializing without actually speaking a word all day. So I should imagine. I mean, I'm like you, Pat. I'm an extrovert who's also introverted. I know when I'm done, but I miss actually talking in real life to people, because yes, I can sit and I'm talking to people all day, and then I go to actually speak and use my voice and realize I've not exercised my vocal cords. We're on pretty much 1 minute to go, Pat.
Right. Okay. I was confused. It was 50 or 50. Oh no.
55. Okay,
Apparently, we have to
55
keep talking to you for another 6 minutes. Okay, Ron, say something.
What I would like to do, I would like to be able to travel again. Well, my cunning plan is to use rail and do the Baltic. So my plan is to go out and spend a month out with a lightweight bag and just me and my wife and my young son just go and spend 3 or 4 weeks, if not longer, and just do that to feel safely, to be able to travel in the low key, low carbon as much as possible, and just enjoy it. Enjoy traveling.
I mean, if we were in Fantasyland, I would basically say, "Oh, I would like to go to Greek island in the height of summer, and stay in a flat or a villa right near a really nice cantina, and spend all day drinking Greek beer and eating Greek food under the shade." Anyway, that would be
That
Fantasyland.
sounds luxurious. Yeah, I was thinking I had actually, before all this happened, I promised my kids that if they got a better mark for Spanish than they were currently getting. Now, at the time, they were on track to get the modern GCSE. They were on track to get a 2, which I think is worse than an F. Let me say, I forced them to take a modern language because I'm good at modern languages. They're not good at modern languages.
Well,
but I said to them if they could up that 2 to like a 4 is fine. A 4 is like a D or an E, but we'll do. That'll do. If they can up it to that, I would take them to Spain. So I'd quite like the world to sort itself out so I can actually give them my promise and take them to Spain, hopefully before they have to then sit the exam so they get some practice in.
I was going to say, aren't we terrible not planning all these international trips? But actually, I've worked out how to get to Greek islands by train. So
Oh yeah, I totally could get to Spain by trip. My mum will tell you all about the time she drove to Spain in the original Austin Mini, which was an 800cc engine. So it's doable.
And Julie's been to Czech a couple of times recently, and I'd like to go on one of those trips. But anyway, sorry. Yes. Another life.
This isn't a post-apocalypse we wanted. We didn't want to be stuck in our house, because even the books I was reading, somebody would pick up their backpack and they'd go traveling because they were looking for like the one other couple of people that hadn't been killed by this terrible virus, or they'd be like Mary Shelley in The Last Man and they'd steal a boat. She had a dog as well. That trope started early. If you're at the end of the world, you still need your dog.
Yeah, it's been quite a, for an apocalypse, it's very boring, isn't it?
It's been a very boring apocalypse. Yes. I think we could call that our final note, quite frankly.
No adventure in it. Yeah, okay. I think we're done. Ron, got anything you want to add?
No, it's fine by me.
Okay. If you've got about 2 minutes if anybody's got a question for us.
It's funny, I did say, I'll probably be doing most of this convention on a phone, but I have actually broken out and stolen the big computer, hence the weird angle, and so I can check.
Oh, that's an interesting thing. Marcus Rowland is saying The Second Sleep, which is, it's a book by Robert Harris, where the world has ended because the internet fell over and something else. But it's a very good book, very worth reading. But yeah, last book his reading group did before lockdown. So it's all your fault, Marcus. You.
Yeah.
And yes, Iceland is another place I'd like to go. Yes, I see that too. No, sorry, we must stop doing this. We're going to live in a different world where we're going to go to Iceland like Alison Scott went to Australia. Yeah. See lots of videos. Graham Head, what will the next disaster be? You mean after the pandemic and Brexit? Ooh, I don't know. Riots and zombies in the street.
Yeah, I think after a pandemic and after Brexit, it's going to be a zombie apocalypse and living on a farm that's surrounded by big fences and eating some tasty smoked rat.
Yes. Ron, next apocalypse?
The internet dropping out the throttle. We're losing the internet.
Oh, You have a horrific imagination, young man. That's terrible. Paul.
Very bad.
Okay, I think we're just about down to our last second. So thank you very much, Ron Gemmell and Adela.
everyone.
It's been fantastic, and I've really enjoyed that hour, and I hope everybody else has as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Bye.
Yes.
Bye.
Now, I don't